Hello, Steeler Nation, and welcome to your Steeler Nation podcast, part of the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network and sponsored by Total Sports Enterprises. I'm your host, Stryker, and today I am broadcasting from Feargal Blades here in Austin, Texas, as I'm doing my nationwide tour currently. But now we're at the point of the season where it is now Super Bowl or bust. Can the Steelers make the playoffs? Sure they can. But they need a lot of help to get there, in my opinion. And the biggest problem with them is having to win the next 4 games. Showing last week, I am just sick of the way this team is trying to put together games, when it seems like we are not instituting game plans in a way that keep us competitive in the first half at all. Defense is getting upside down. We're down by 3 or 4 scores entering the second half, then have to rely on the offense going no huddle the rest of the way to try to pull us back into the game. And we've nearly done it twice in 2 games this season. Come back in the fourth quarter and won games where we're completely out of. So what do you do moving forward from this situation? Perhaps you get out of the offensive game set completely. It is time for the Steelers to start initiating the K-gun offense that they used to run with Jim Kelly and the Buffalo Bills in the 1990s. 4 receivers, spread them out, no huddle, quick tempo, the entire game, because this is just an embarrassment, absolute embarrassment. Watch them try to put together any semblance of an offense in the first half, and then watching their defense just completely forget how to play defense in the first half of games. So I understand there's a lot of turnover with defensive players coming in and out. I understand there's been a bunch of injuries, some COVID situations as well. But now we're done with excuses. You're in December football. There is no time for excuses. All you got to do is either you win your game or you got no shot of winning the Super Bowl. And I'll tell you one thing. Cam and Big Ben are talking like this is the 2005 year. These guys are your team leaders, and they 100% believe that they can get this team to a championship. I remember back in 2005 going into that Chicago Bears game, thinking pretty much the season's over, but I was looking to find a fun game, looking to get into it. And what did they do? They committed back to the run. They hit them hard. They out-hit them on defense, and they hit them as hard as they could the rest of the season and the rest of the year all the way through the playoffs. They became the best team at the end of the year, and that is their only way and their only path this year getting to a Super Bowl is to go on a winning streak, and the playoffs start this Sunday against Tennessee. So put up or shut up time for the Steelers. No more excuses. We got tough people to see down the stretch. Tennessee, Kansas City, Ravens, Browns. I mean, we seem to have the Browns and Ravens number, but Kansas City is going to be a tough out. It's going to be an absolute tough out, and we're probably not going to have any home playoff games if we make the playoffs. So 2005 indeed. Will we be the 7th seed? Will we be the first 7th seed to win a Super Bowl? Possibly. Stranger things have happened, but that has never happened yet since we pushed to 7 seeds. So, but we'll see what's going to go on for this weekend. The defense does have to wake up. There's one important piece that I want to start talking about as well on the defensive line, which ended up being one of the worst things to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that was back when Tyson Alualu got hurt. Carlos Davis also was on injured reserve. So Carlos Davis was always supposed to be our backup nose tackle. We threw in Isaiah Buggs, next man up, and Davis flat out beat him. He's higher on the depth chart. He's the better player. He's got the higher ceiling. Martavis Adams can't make the game this week, it looks like, with his positive COVID test. So what does that leave us with? Hopefully Carlos Davis coming back and playing at a high level again, because that is what we need to have. Cam Hayward be a little bit more active there on his side of the field, allow Wormley to be a little bit more active, take up a couple more of these players so our inside linebackers can just hit the holes and hit them hard and hit them downhill, for gosh sakes, because right now we're playing on our heels, and we cannot be playing on our heels against this great running team and against Tennessee coming up for this game. Otherwise, it's going to be another upside-down game. We're going to watch them run straight down the field, 3-4 drives in a row, scoring every drive. San Diego game, Minnesota game. Sick of it. Sick of it as a Steeler fan. I know you're sick of it as a Steeler fan too. But putting Carlos Davis in there can help plug that hole. It can. Getting Robert Spillane back can help plug that hole as well. But we'll talk about the injury situation here in a couple seconds. One thing I want to talk about too is just our boy, TJ Watt, getting lots of talk for Defensive Player of the Year, getting some talk for NFL MVP. His only problem, the only thing holding him back is the games that he's missing. If he played every game, he would be in the talk for both of those pretty legitimately. But you've got to take credit, or you got to give him credit for what he is doing in these games, playing 3 less games than anybody else in the NFL. He's already leading the league in sacks with 16 games. He's done it in 10 games. He's played in 11, but he did it in 10 games. Obviously, that groin coming up and hitting him, pulling him out early in the last game, made it so he didn't have a stat in that game. But he is at a high rate of sacks, and he is playing hard. And for him to already be leading the league and still continue to be leading the league now, at this point, Myles Garrett's at 15, TJ Watt's at 16. I mean, this guy is ripping off a 1.6 sack clip per game. That is unheard of. I mean, going around a 1, you're insane. That's insane. Like, 16 sacks in a season for a 16-game season. That's what Harrison's got. Harrison did it in 15 games. Watt hit 16 sacks in 10 games. I mean, don't get me wrong. I thought, like, Harrison's one of the most disruptive players I've ever seen. So it's kind of insane to see what TJ Watt is doing this season. Hitting those sacks, forcing those fumbles, getting the trifectas, the sack, fumble recovery. Those are and then if you can throw a touchdown on top of that, here we go. Because we need defensive plays and defensive playmakers coming around. So number-wise, it's incredible that it looks like, he's going to beat 16 sacks for the season. He's going to beat the Steelers' record, which would be any more sack, another half sack, and he passes James Harrison. I believe I read a report earlier where we had 17 and a half sacks as the unofficial record by a player before the steel curtain. And I'll get those numbers up a little bit, but I can't remember exactly. But still, TJ Watt should pass 17 and a half sacks in 4 games. Conservatively, he should have 4 sacks in the next 4 games. The way the Steelers are playing, they need to play 4 games. He's not going to be taking a game off. He's going to be playing all 4 of these games. So, yeah, I think he can have a chance to push at that. So what if we project that 1.6 sacks per game across the last 4 games? That's his average. Conservatively, it comes out to 6.5 sacks. So if TJ Watt can get 6.5 sacks in the next 4 games, he ties the record for Michael Strahan in 3 games less played. That's an incredible sack. Actually, technically, it would be 2 games less played because we have 17 games in this season. Strahan had 16. I think that's the way it works in this one. But still, a great, incredible statistic. If he ticks up 1 extra half sack, he owns that record completely. But 6.5 sacks is not out of the question for the next 4 games for a player like TJ Watt. It's just not. We know we're playing the Ravens again. We know that they're going to be that Lamar Jackson hangs onto that ball way too long. Going to have a chance in that game of racking up some sacks. Tannehill can get that ball up pretty quickly. They do a lot of running. This is going to be a tougher game to get sacks in. Mahomes, another one of those players that hangs onto the ball a little too long to try to make plays. He can get hit. He can get hit as well. And we all know Baker Mayfield, we can get at him if we can force him to be one-dimensional. So, because he's trying to make a play down the field as well. So, yeah, I'd say this next 4 games, you got a shot at it. Got a shot at it. And I'll be rooting for it. It'd be absolutely incredible to see if TJ Watt can end up coming up and breaking the sack record. All of Steeler Nation would lose it. He'd definitely win the NFL Defensive Player of the Year. And still, like I said, he should be on that track to winning it this season. But he's got to stay healthy. Right now, that groin is bothering him. He said it tweaked up a little bit before the game when they were playing in Minnesota, and he just couldn't continue once it flared. So says he's feeling good now, feeling 100%. Obviously, he's not 100% because it's a soft tissue injury and they suck. They always kind of tweak and come back and you play through them. He's been playing through it. He's been playing through it for a while. So I don't count any Watt out for playing through pain, but he's not going to play injured, obviously. And if he can't go, he won't go. So but we do know for a fact, Steeler Nation, he's going this weekend, and that is a positive, and that is a definite. So, couple rules that came up here in the NFL involving COVID-19 and the regulations for testing and the regulations for getting back on the field after you test positive. I know Steeler Nation, you're upset a little bit here. You're like, whoa, Cleveland Browns. Everybody's got COVID-19 on the Cleveland Browns. The NFL changed the rules. Oh, they changed the rules. They're helping out Cleveland. They're helping out the Browns. Not exactly the case, guys. I mean, the Washington Redskins are decimated right now. So are the Rams. But the NFL has at least done the right thing on staying on the advanced metrics for determining on whether or not you have enough viral load to be infectious. I love big words, so I have a biopsych degree. But they have started going to that aspect and that avenue for testing, which is more accurate than knowing if you're have COVID or not, because you can still technically be positive for COVID-19, but test negative for having a contagious viral load, which means you can play, you're not going to get anybody else contagious. And that's important. That's the important aspect. And that at least cuts down on the timing to get everybody back, because before we had that 24-hour window where you had to test twice without a positive test to be able to return to practice or to return to playing a game. You're still going to be on the exact same rules if you are unvaccinated. It's 10 days. Wham, you're done. If you're not vaccinated, you're out for 10 days. Testing doesn't matter. Anything like that doesn't matter. So with the rules now, the way that they're written, it behooves NFL players to start getting tested. And so let's talk about these rules here a little quickly. Obviously, this is the time of the year, too, where the infection rates start to spike because we're in the social months, the winter months. You're not outside as much. And these are the times between Thanksgiving and New Year's. You're going to be out with family and friends an awful lot. So this is going to create situations where you're going to be around a lot of people. We're going to be spreading virus. We got the newest Omicron coming around, which tends to be very, very easy to spread, but fortunately not as dangerous as the Delta when that one came out. Still something to be concerned about, and something really to be concerned about from a sports watching perspective, because if it spreads that quickly, we're already seeing it come around the NFL, and the NFL is mostly vaccinated. So breakthrough cases are happening. Fortunately, the vaccinations are going to keep people as safe as possible, but these are the new rules now moving forward. We're going back now to mandatory mask wearing at teams' facilities and social distancing. Grab-and-go meal service in team cafeterias and all virtual meetings, limiting on the number of people allowed in weight rooms, and restrictions on activities outside of the facility. Kind of like the rules that we had before the vaccine came out. Teams with outbreaks. So if there's an outbreak currently on your team, currently referring to Cleveland, currently referring to Washington and the Rams. Daily testing of all players and personnel, vaccinated or not. But the rest of the teams won't be subjected to those daily testing as of yet. If there's an outbreak on a team, they will, and that's the way it'll move to. So now we have an outbreak on a team. Now we have positive tests. How is that now going to work to get back out onto the field? Right now, there are 3 steps to getting back on the field, getting back at practice in a faster way than we currently have. Though TJ Watt did do it in 5 days under the old rules. That was insane. But he was healthy. He wasn't showing signs of the illness, even though he tested positive. Then he had 2 negative tests. He got through it pretty quickly. So kudos to him. His vaccine worked and helped him get through that one pretty quickly. But these are the new rules and regulations. 2 PCR tests that are either negative or produce a CT value of 35 or greater. That 35 number is the number they have now found that states you are no longer contagious. You don't have enough virus in your system to pass it on to someone else. So you can have a positive test with a 35, evidently, or greater number. You won't be passing on that viral load. You're not contagious. You can go back to practice. One PCR test that is either negative or produces a CT value of 35 or greater, and a negative MESA test. Result taken within 24 hours of the PCR test. The MESA tests are another fast test. Quick tests usually get that back in about an hour. And now the fastest way to get back onto the field, 2 negative MESA tests. So I don't know if teams are going to start using that before a game and say like, okay, well, we know we can get a MESA test back in an hour. It's game day. Let's test them at 9 a.m., test them again at 10 a.m. They're clear at 11 a.m. They can go out and practice. That might be it. That might be the way we start getting players back on back on the field quickly. And playing without being able to pass on the virus to other people. So just interesting stuff that we have to keep in mind, because this is the time of the year that started screwing the Steelers pretty hard too. Right around Thanksgiving on. The rest of the NFL, it happened last year, happening again this year. It will happen until we're finally through COVID, because it seems to be a virus like the flu that just keeps coming around every year seasonally when we start getting a little bit more communal in close spaces with family and friends. According to the NFL Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Alan Stills, previous NFL test analysts have shown players with CT values at a level of 35 or higher do not transmit COVID-19 and thus would not be contagious, as we alluded to either. That is the official stance. That is why these tests have changed. And it's good. It's good that the NFL is following the science of it. Sure, it might help out a couple teams that we don't like right now, but it may help us out in the future. We might get an outbreak too. You never know how it's going to work out, though our protocols have already been at the higher end of the league and we've taken it at least a bit more seriously than the rest of the league. Just to me, it's interesting to me that a place like Cleveland can get an outbreak. It's not a big metropolitan area, a huge place like Los Angeles, like Washington, D.C., big markets, lots of people. Surprised New York doesn't have some breakouts, to tell you the truth, too, because that's where everybody lives, New York, New Jersey area. On the East Coast, the highest population there as well. But California, New York, you'd expect to see those types of numbers. We'll see what's going to be, though, moving forward. Hopefully not, but at least there's a pathway now to get people back on the field. And that's what's important. So let's start talking about the Steelers injury situation going into the game. Who's going to be playing, Stryker? Who's going to be playing? Well, I'm telling you who I think is going to be playing. I already talked about Carlos Davis. He's going to be back on the field. TJ Watt's going to be back on the field. Now Alex Highsmith came out, too, talking about his quad. He says, you better believe I will be back on the field as well. Him practicing fully on Thursday tends to be the reason why I think that is also going to be the case. Ben Roethlisberger is obviously going to practice. There's nothing going to keep him off of these games, even though he didn't practice on Wednesday, was limited on Thursday. I expect him to be a full participant today and get out there and practice. Robert Spillane, he's been practicing fully as well. I'm excited for him. Because he's going to be a big part of this defense moving forward. We need him on the field. We need him to help give Bush some rests and get in there and hit those holes hard like we know he can. And like he did against Tennessee when they had Henry and he wrecked him on the goal line play in the hole, hitting as hard as anybody can hit another player coming through a hole. Loved that play. It did injure him, but I loved that play. Now the other players that we might not know or might not be able to see coming back into the game, BJ Finney obviously was moved to injured reserve. He's going to be missing the next 3 games. The earliest he can return is just after the Cleveland game on the 3rd of January. So 1-4 is the earliest he'd be able to come back. Zach Banner banged up his knee. I think he's been having swelling issues. They've been monitoring his knee. So anytime he has a practice, if it swells up, they're like, well, something's up. We got to rest him, see if the swelling goes down. Sorry, Zach, probably not going to be playing or be active for this game. Isaiah Buggs was a full practice participant on Wednesday, didn't practice with his ankle on Thursday. He's trending the wrong direction, as well as Kevin Rader with his hip. Had a limited practice on Wednesday, didn't practice at all on Thursday. Both of those guys got banged up in practice and in the game. So not looking for any of those 3, Banner, Buggs, or Rader, to be playing this week. Probably projecting now. So the big elephant in the room, Joe Hayden. Joe Hayden has missed the past 4 games. He practiced week 12 in a limited capacity all week, but did not come back. And then the next 2 weeks, he didn't practice at all. So I think he tried to push that foot a little too quickly. But this week, at least, he's starting to get a little trend. He didn't practice on Wednesday. Don't necessarily know if that was a vet day off because he did practice on Wednesday in a limited capacity. So I think there is a good chance if Hayden comes back today, practices fully, he's playing. If he comes back today and practices limited, he's going to be questionable for the game. If he comes back and doesn't practice at all, obviously he's out. But he's got a chance. He's trying to get back out here. He's trying to get back and help the team. But at least Witherspoon's been helping out now and doing a good job since he's been on the team for a bit. Steelers, at least going up into this game, we know the Steelers have to stop Tannehill, but most importantly, they have to stop the run first. Get out there, hit your gaps. Is Carlos Davis going to be the guy to help us be in a situation that we can make sure that we can make these plays? I'm hoping so, because that's the only way we're going to be able to stop their ground game, force Tannehill back to pass. He is an accurate passer, but I've got confidence in the pass rush if we are in those situations for Highsmith and Watt to get home. Now that they're feeling a little bit better, now that Watt's feeling a little bit better, getting 10 days off helped out with that mini break. And this is going to be the healthiest the Steelers are for the rest of the season. They are not going to be any healthier than they are right now after a Thursday game with the 10 days off with the half bye. This is the run. Steelers, Super Bowl or bust. Can they do it? I think they can. But we'll have to see. We'll have to hope and pray for health. We'll have to hope and pray for the balls to bounce our way. And, of course, we'll always be rooting for our Steelers in that respect. Steeler Nation, thank you for joining me on the SteelerNation.com podcast. Be sure to check us out on Tuesdays at 7 o'clock for the vidcast on our YouTube channel /Steeler Nation. Check us out. Check out the great sports content over at DKPittsburghSports.com. Everything on the Pirates, everything on the Penguins, everything on the Steelers. We got Pitt Panthers. We got Penn State. We got everything. Come on over. Check us out. Everything's all the podcasts, all the vidcasts. DK Pittsburgh Sports. Great place to be. Also, read our great articles over at SteelerNation.com. Tweet us at SteelerNation. Instagram us at SteelerNation.com. Follow the Steeler Nation podcast on Twitter at _SN Podcast. And follow your host, Steeler Nation Stryker, on Twitter and Instagram at SN Stryker. Stryker spelled with a Y. Thank you for joining us for the SteelerNation.com podcast, sponsored by Total Sports Enterprises and part of the DK Pittsburgh Podcast Network. I'm your host, G. Stryker, rooting along with you as always. Go Steelers!